Most perennial flowers have a dirty little secret. They come back every year, but they often don't actually flower for very long. You plant them in spring, prepare the soil, water them, and wait for that first beautiful flush of color. Then only a few weeks later, the flowers disappear and the garden is left with mostly green foliage. A beautiful perennial garden should not peak for only 3 weeks and then remain empty for months. The right combination of perennials can create flowers from late spring through summer and all the way toward the first frost. These 17 perennial flowers are chosen for exceptionally long bloom periods and the ability to return year after year. A mature perennial garden filled with layers of flowers can remain colorful and alive for most of the growing season. The secret is not finding one magical plant that blooms endlessly, but combining early, middle, and late season performers. The first plant is Catmint, a soft lavender blue perennial that can create a spectacular cloud of color along garden borders. A mature planting of Catmint can produce masses of lavender blue flowers above attractive gray-green foliage. Catmint can begin flowering in late spring and continue producing color through summer when properly maintained. A light trim after the first major flush encourages fresh growth and another wave of flowers. Catmint works beautifully along pathways, at the front of borders, beside retaining walls, and across gentle slopes. Its flowers attract bees and pollinators, making a catmint border look alive with constant insect activity. Hardy and relatively low maintenance, catmint is an excellent foundation plant for a long-blooming perennial garden. The second plant is hardy geranium, a true perennial completely different from the common annual geraniums grown in containers. Hardy geraniums can produce intense blue-violet flowers above attractive green foliage for an extended portion of the growing season. The famous Rosanne variety creates a soft spreading mound that naturally fills spaces throughout a perennial border. Hardy geranium works beautifully around roses, beneath taller plants, along pathways, and across the front of a flower bed. Its ability to fill empty spaces without requiring constant attention makes it valuable for natural-looking garden designs. The third plant is Echinacea, a classic perennial that now comes in far more colors than the traditional purple coneflower. Modern Echinacea varieties can display pink, red, orange, yellow, white, and unusual multicolored flowers. Its large, colorful flowers attract bees, butterflies, and other pollinators throughout the warm season. Black-eyed Susan works beautifully along fences, in meadow-style gardens, beside ornamental grasses, and in large flower drifts. Salvia produces tall flower spikes in intense shades of violet, blue, pink, and other colors depending on the variety. Regular deadheading removes spent flower spikes and encourages the plant to produce fresh flowers instead of stopping early. A sunny position, suitable soil, and regular removal of spent blooms can keep perennial salvia productive throughout summer. The sixth plant is Yarrow, a resilient perennial capable of handling heat, dry conditions, and relatively poor soil once established. Yarrow produces broad, flat flower clusters in shades that can include yellow, white, pink, and red. Its flowers can continue through much of the summer, especially when spent blooms are removed regularly. The flat flower clusters create an architectural shape that contrasts beautifully with vertical flowers and ornamental grasses. Yarrow is especially useful in drought-tolerant gardens, where many traditional flowering plants may struggle. The seventh plant is Coreopsis, a cheerful perennial known for dependable summer flowers and relatively easy maintenance. A group of Coreopsis plants can create a bright pool of color at the front of a perennial border. The open flowers are also accessible to pollinators, making Coreopsis both decorative and useful to the garden ecosystem. White Shasta daisies reflect light and remain visually striking even when the afternoon sunlight begins to fade. Planting several Shasta daisies together creates a stronger and more intentional landscape effect than using isolated plants. The flowers are also excellent for cutting, allowing the same perennial to provide both garden color and indoor bouquets. The ninth plant is Penstemon, a long-blooming perennial especially valuable for gardeners who want hummingbirds visiting their garden. Penstemon produces tubular flowers in colors such as red, pink, purple, blue, and white, depending on the species and variety. Different penstemon varieties are adapted to different climates, so choosing a variety suited to local conditions is especially important. Penstemon generally performs best in sunny, well-drained locations and should not be left sitting in constantly wet soil. The 10th plant is Agastache, one of the strongest choices for adding color and pollinator activity during the hottest part of summer. Agastache produces tall flower spikes in coral, orange, pink, purple, and other vivid colors depending on the variety. Its bloom period arrives when many spring perennials are already finished, helping bridge the garden into late summer and fall. Hummingbirds, bees, and butterflies are strongly attracted to Agastache flowers during the summer season. The 11th plant is Scabiosa, a delicate-looking perennial whose pincushion flowers hide an impressive level of toughness. Scabiosa can produce blue, lavender, white, pink, and burgundy flowers on slender stems that move naturally in the breeze. Regular deadheading can encourage continued flowering and keep the plant producing new blooms for a surprisingly long period. Scabiosa works beautifully near the front of borders and is also an excellent long-lasting cut flower. Butterflies are attracted to Scabiosa, turning a mature planting into a lively pollinator landing area during summer. The 12th plant is Heuchera, or coral bells, a perennial that remains visually valuable even when it is not flowering. Heuchera foliage can appear in deep burgundy, bronze, caramel, lime green, silver, and many striking combinations. Many varieties are particularly useful in partial shade beneath trees, beside buildings, and in other areas where sun-loving flowers struggle. The colorful foliage allows Heuchera to contribute visual interest during periods when other perennials are between bloom cycles. In colder regions, freeze-thaw cycles can push the plant crown upward, so gardeners should inspect the plants in early spring. The 13th plant is Helenium, a late summer performer with warm yellow, orange, copper, and red flowers. Helenium becomes especially valuable when many early-season perennials are beginning to lose their strongest colors. Its fiery flowers combine beautifully with ornamental grasses, creating movement and glowing late-summer color. Plant Helenium where its flowers can be seen clearly, especially toward the middle or back of a perennial border. The 14th plant is Russian sage, a silver-foliaged perennial covered with clouds of small blue-purple flowers. Russian sage is particularly useful in hot and dry gardens because established plants can tolerate difficult summer conditions. Its cool silver and blue appearance creates a beautiful contrast with warm-colored flowers such as yellow and orange perennials. Russian sage can be combined with roses, Coreopsis, ornamental grasses, and gravel garden plantings. The 15th plant is butterfly weed, a vivid orange flowering perennial with important ecological value for butterflies and monarch caterpillars. Its bright orange flowers create a dramatic visual contrast when planted beside blue or purple flowers such as Catmint and Salvia. Butterfly weed generally prefers sunny, well-drained conditions and can tolerate heat and periods of dryness once established. The plant continues to provide visual interest after flowering as decorative seed pods develop and eventually open. The 16th plant is Rudbeckia Goldsturm, a dependable perennial producing masses of golden yellow flowers with dark centers. Its summer to fall flowering period makes it an excellent bridge between midsummer color and the approach of the first frost. A large drift of Rudbeckia can look like a river of gold moving through the garden. Rudbeckia combines especially well with ornamental grasses, purple salvia, echinacea, and other long-blooming perennials. The 17th plant is garden phlox, a tall perennial capable of creating powerful vertical structure and extended summer color. Garden phlox produces large clusters of flowers in pink, white, purple, red, and numerous combinations depending on the cultivar. Choosing disease-resistant and long-blooming cultivars can make a major difference in how well the plants perform through summer. Good air circulation, appropriate sunlight, adequate moisture, and regular removal of spent flowers can encourage stronger performance. Garden phlox adds height behind lower plants such as Catmint and Scabiosa, creating multiple layers of flowers in the same border. The most important lesson is that no single perennial needs to bloom continuously from spring until frost for the garden to stay colorful. Instead, Combine early season performers with plants that peak in early summer, midsummer, late summer, and fall. Echinacea, Rudbeckia, Yarrow, Coreopsis, and other summer performers can dominate the garden during the heart of the growing season. Agastache, Helenium, butterfly weed, and other late-season plants can continue the display as summer turns toward fall. When one plant finishes flowering, another begins, creating a visual sequence that keeps the garden changing for months. This layered approach is how professional-looking perennial borders remain interesting, instead of reaching one peak and becoming empty. The greatest advantage of perennial gardening is that you are building a garden, rather than starting over every spring. Established plants can become larger and more impressive over time, while requiring far less work than replacing annual flowers every season. Choose plants according to bloom time, climate, soil, sunlight, and what happens after the first flush of flowers disappears. A successful perennial garden should evolve through the seasons, with different colors and textures taking over as the months pass. By combining the right plants, a garden can remain full of flowers from late spring through summer and toward the first frost.